The turkey was still in my oven when Derek called to uninvite me from Christmas dinner. "Dad, we've decided to keep it small this year, just immediate family." The words cut through the December air like a blade. Immediate family. After 35 years of being his father, after 18 years of bailing him out of every financial crisis, I apparently no longer qualified as immediate family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "What about Madison and Tyler?" I asked, thinking of my 8-year-old granddaughter who'd been asking when Grandpa Walt was coming over to help her build the gingerbread house. "What about our tradition?" "Linda thinks it's better this way, less complicated." Derek's voice carried that dismissive tone I'd heard too often lately. The same tone he'd used when explaining why he couldn't repay the down payment loan for his house. The same tone when he'd brushed off my concerns about his spending habits. "Maybe we can do something after New Year's." Maybe. The most non-committal word in the English language. I stood in my kitchen, looking at the 20-pound turkey I'd been cooking since dawn, the homemade cranberry sauce Linda used to rave about, the sweet potato casserole Madison had helped me perfect last Christmas. All of it suddenly felt foolish. The preparations of an old man who'd forgotten his place in his own family's hierarchy. "I understand," I said quietly, though I understood nothing except that my son had become someone I no longer recognized. "Have a wonderful Christmas, Derek." I hung up the phone and stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. 68 years old, retired for 3 years now, and apparently disposable. The man who'd built Thompson and Associates Electrical from a single truck in the toolbox now stood alone in a house that smelled like Christmas dinner nobody would share. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd forgotten that his old man didn't just know how to wire houses and run electrical jobs. Walter Thompson knew how to read contracts, understand financial documents, and most importantly, he knew exactly where his money had gone over the past 18 years. I pulled my laptop from the dining room table and opened the folder I'd kept meticulously organized since Derek graduated college. Every loan documented, every payment tracked, every financial favor cataloged with the precision that had made my electrical business successful for 4 decades. The numbers told a story Derek probably hoped I'd forgotten. The first entry dated back to 2006, when Derek called in tears about losing his apartment deposit. "Dad, I just need $2,000 to cover the security deposit. I'll pay you back when I get my tax refund." The tax refund had gone toward a vacation to Cancun with Linda instead. The loan became a gift by mutual silent agreement, the first of many. College graduation brought bigger requests. A reliable car for job interviews turned into a brand new Honda Accord. "You can't show up to marketing positions in a beat-up Toyota, Dad. Image matters in this business." The $12,000 car loan somehow became another gift when Derek's entry-level salary proved insufficient for monthly payments. Linda entered the picture during Derek's 3rd year of marketing work, bringing her own financial expectations and social aspirations. Suddenly, my practical, hardworking son became interested in restaurants I couldn't pronounce and vacation destinations that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The wedding alone had consumed $28,000 of my retirement savings, though Derek and Linda had insisted on calling it our contribution to their future happiness. Madison's birth in 2016 triggered a housing crisis. Derek's apartment was too small, the neighborhood too rough, the schools inadequate for their daughter's future. The down payment for the house in Maple Ridge subdivision required $18,000, more than I'd ever spend on anything except my business. "Dad, this is an investment in Madison's education. The schools here will set her up for life." I'd liquidated my IRA early, paying penalties and taxes that Derek never asked about. The house purchase had been completed in Derek's name only, despite my down payment funding the entire transaction. For tax purposes, Derek had explained, though I suspect Linda had insisted on keeping my name off any official documents. Tyler's arrival 2 years later brought another round of financial emergencies. Childcare costs, medical bills, a larger vehicle to accommodate 2 car seats. Each request came with detailed explanations about necessity and promises of future repayment. Each promise evaporated under the pressure of Derek's expanding lifestyle expectations. The most recent crisis had occurred 6 months ago. Derek's marketing firm had downsized, reducing his salary by 15% just as Linda decided to expand her real estate business. Their mortgage payment, inflated by years of refinancing for home improvements and debt consolidation, suddenly became unmanageable. "Dad, we might lose the house. Madison and Tyler can't be uprooted from their schools. You understand what that would do to them, right?" $47,000 had transferred from my savings account to Derek's mortgage company. The payment bought them breathing room, and me a lecture about fiscal responsibility from Linda, who'd somehow forgotten that my fiscal responsibility was the only thing standing between their family and foreclosure. Every dollar spent, every sacrifice made, every retirement plan adjusted to accommodate Derek's financial emergencies, the spreadsheet showed a total that made my chest tighten. $485,000 over 18 years. Nearly $500,000 that had flowed from my accounts to Derek's problems without a single payment returned or even a genuine thank you in recent memory. The turkey timer chimed, jarring me from the financial records. I pulled the perfectly cooked bird from the oven and set it on the counter to rest. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the morning preparing a feast for a family that had decided I wasn't family enough to invite. The afternoon stretched ahead, empty, except for whatever Christmas movie marathon the television networks had planned for lonely people. My phone buzzed with a text message from Madison, sent from Linda's phone since 8-year-olds don't have their own devices yet. "Grandpa Walt, are you coming for Christmas dinner? I made you a drawing of a snowman." The message included a photo of a crayon drawing featuring a lopsided snowman wearing what appeared to be an electrician's hard hat. I stared at that drawing for a long time, thinking about the granddaughter who still remembered me as the man who taught her to use a screwdriver and explained how light switches work. Madison had no idea her parents had uninvited me from Christmas dinner. Tyler probably didn't understand why Grandpa wasn't coming to help him open presents like previous years. Derek and Linda had made their decision based on adult politics and social calculations. The children would pay the price, losing the grandfather who'd been a constant presence in their lives since birth. But maybe that was Derek's intention. Maybe distancing the kids from me was part of a larger strategy to reduce family obligations and financial expectations. I walked through my house, noting the photographs documenting Derek's life from childhood through marriage and parenthood. Little League games where I'd coached his team, high school graduation where I'd applauded louder than anyone in the auditorium, college visits where I'd helped him choose the school that would set him up for success, wedding preparations where I'd written check after check with genuine happiness for his future. When had gratitude been replaced by entitlement? When had my son started viewing my financial support as obligation rather than gift? When had I become embarrassing enough to exclude from family celebrations?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The answer was probably gradual. So slow I'd missed the transition from grateful son to entitled adult. Each crisis I'd solved had created expectations for the next one. Each financial rescue had established precedent for future rescues. Derek had learned that Dad's money would always be available, but Dad's presence was negotiable, depending on social convenience. But Derek had forgotten something important about his old man. Walter Thompson hadn't built a successful electrical business by accepting other people's terms. When someone tried to cut him out of a deal he'd funded, Walt knew how to protect his interests. When clients tried to stiff him on payments, Walt had methods for collecting what he was owed. And when ungrateful family members decided to treat him like a bank account rather than a father, Walt Thompson had resources they'd never considered. I opened my laptop again and navigated to the Cedar Falls County website. Property records were public information, accessible to anyone who knew where to look. Derek's house at 447 Maple Ridge Drive appeared on my screen with all its financial details: purchase price, mortgage balance, tax assessments, and most importantly, foreclosure proceedings. The documents told a story Derek hadn't shared during his last financial emergency 6 months ago. My $47,000 payment had delayed foreclosure proceedings but hadn't resolved them. Derek's mortgage remained in default, protected only by Iowa's extended foreclosure timeline and his lawyer's delaying tactics. First National Bank of Cedar Falls would eventually foreclose on the property, probably within the next 90 days, unless Derek found another financial miracle. The house would go to auction, where investors and cash buyers would bid for the privilege of owning Derek's dream home at a significant discount. I picked up my phone and dialed Frank Rodriguez, my former business partner who'd invested his retirement money in real estate ventures since selling his share of Thompson & Associates. "Frank, it's Walt. I need some information about foreclosure auctions in Cedar Falls." "Walt, good to hear from you. Merry Christmas, by the way. What's going on with foreclosures?" "There's a property coming up for auction that might interest me. Investment opportunity." I kept my voice casual, professional. "What's the process for cash buyers?" Frank explained the auction procedures with enthusiasm. Cash buyers had significant advantages over financed purchasers. Winning bids required 10% down immediately, with the balance due within 30 days. No inspections, no contingencies, no financing delays. The market's been good to investors willing to move fast with cash. What property are you looking at? "I'll send you the details later. Just wanted to understand the process." I thanked Frank and ended the call, my mind already working through the logistics. Derek thought he'd solved his Christmas problem by excluding his embarrassing father from family dinner. He'd kept his social circle comfortable while maintaining access to my financial resources for future emergencies. Linda could enjoy her perfect family celebration without worrying about explaining my working-class background to her real estate colleagues. They'd miscalculated badly. Walter Thompson was done being treated like an ATM with legs. It was time for Derek and Linda to learn that actions have consequences, even when those actions hurt the people who love you most. I carved myself a slice of turkey and settled in to research foreclosure auction procedures. Christmas dinner would be a quiet affair this year, but the new year was going to be very interesting indeed. The education of Derek Thompson was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of a well-planned electrical installation. I dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Derek's wedding and Madison's baptism, and drove downtown to First National Bank of Cedar Falls. The parking lot was nearly empty at 8:30, giving me first choice of spaces near the entrance.
Margaret Chen, the branch manager, greeted me with the professional courtesy reserved for longtime customers with substantial accounts. "Mr. Thompson, wonderful to see you. How can we help you today?" "I'm interested in participating in upcoming foreclosure auctions. I understand you handle several properties each quarter." I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. This was business, nothing more. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. Real estate investment wasn't typically associated with retired electricians, but my account history spoke for itself. 43 years of steady deposits, minimal withdrawals, and a current balance that reflected decades of careful financial management. "Certainly, let me get you connected with our auction specialist." 20 minutes later, I sat across from David Park, a sharp-dressed young man who specialized in distressed property sales. He spread auction catalogs across his desk with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed his work. "We have several interesting properties coming up in January and February. What type of investment are you considering?" "Single-family homes in established neighborhoods, something that would appeal to families with school-aged children." I studied the listings, pretending to evaluate each property carefully. Good bones, solid construction, maybe need some updating. David nodded approvingly. That's a smart strategy. Young families often overlook properties that need cosmetic work, focusing on move-in ready homes instead. You can buy at a discount and improve value through renovation. He pointed to several listings that fit my stated criteria. These 3 might interest you, all in desirable school districts, all foreclosed due to financial hardship rather than structural problems. The third property he showed me was 447 Maple Ridge Drive. Derek's house appeared in the auction catalog with clinical precision. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, attached 2-car garage, approximately 2,400 square feet. Built in 2014, colonial architecture, cedar shake siding, professionally landscaped. Estimated market value, $420,000. Opening bid, $340,000. This one's particularly interesting, David continued, unaware he was describing my son's home. The owners defaulted after a job loss situation. They've been fighting the foreclosure for 8 months, but the legal process is nearly complete. The property's well-maintained, great neighborhood, excellent schools, should attract significant bidder interest. I studied the photographs of Derek's house as if seeing it for the first time. The front yard where Tyler had learned to ride his bicycle, the driveway where I'd taught Madison to draw hopscotch squares with sidewalk chalk, the porch where we'd carved pumpkins last October before Derek decided I was too embarrassing for family gatherings. "What's the timeline for this particular property?" I asked, pointing to the listing. David consulted his computer screen. Auction date is January 15th. The owners have until January 10th to resolve the default, but based on the court filings, that seems unlikely. They'd need to pay approximately $63,000 in back payments, penalties, and legal fees. $63,000. Derek had never mentioned the true scope of his financial crisis when he'd asked for that $47,000 loan 6 months ago. He'd presented it as a temporary setback easily resolved with my help. The reality was much more serious than he'd admitted, probably to himself as much as to me. "I'd like to register for the auction." I pulled out my checkbook and driver's license. "What documentation do you need from potential bidders?" The registration process was straightforward but thorough. Proof of identity, verification of funds, acknowledgement of auction terms and conditions. Cash buyers needed to demonstrate liquid assets sufficient to complete purchases without financing contingencies. My banking relationship with First National simplified the documentation significantly. Mr. Thompson, I should mention that successful bidders need to be prepared for immediate possession situations. Sometimes foreclosed homeowners are still residing in properties at auction time. We handle the legal eviction process, but it can be emotionally challenging for all parties involved. Emotionally challenging. The understatement of the year. I signed the registration documents with steady hands, though my mind was racing through the implications. If I successfully bid on Derek's house, I would own the property where my grandchildren lived. Derek and Linda would become my tenants, assuming I chose to let them stay. The drive home took me past Maple Ridge subdivision, past the house that might soon belong to me. Derek's Honda sat in the driveway next to Linda's white SUV. Both vehicles financed through loans I'd probably helped fund indirectly. Christmas decorations still adorned the front porch, though they seemed less festive now that I understood the financial reality behind their suburban facade. Madison's bicycle lay on its side near the garage, pink streamers trailing from the handlebars. Tyler's soccer ball sat abandoned in the flower bed Linda had insisted on professionally landscaping 2 years ago. Normal suburban family life maintained through my financial support while I was excluded from their actual family experiences. My phone rang as I pulled into my own driveway. Derek's name appeared on the caller ID. The first time he'd contacted me since the Christmas dinner phone call. I let it ring 4 times before answering, no longer eager to accommodate his schedule. "Dad, hey, how was your Christmas?" His voice carried forced cheerfulness, the tone of someone making obligatory contact with a distant relative. "Quiet. I cooked turkey for one and watched old movies.
I kept my response factual, not accusatory. How was your dinner? Great, really nice. Madison asked about you several times. She wanted to show you her snowman drawing. Derek paused, perhaps realizing how that sounded. Linda's parents came by, and you know how her mother gets with too many people around. Linda's mother had never met me, so her discomfort was purely hypothetical. But Derek needed an excuse that wasn't entirely his own decision. Blaming Linda's family was easier than taking responsibility for excluding his father from Christmas dinner. I'm sure Madison understood. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the quiet house that still smelled faintly of turkey and disappointment. Was there something specific you needed? Actually, yeah. I wanted to talk about our financial situation. Things have been tight since the company restructured, and Linda's real estate business is seasonal. We might need another short-term loan to get through the winter months. Another loan. The audacity was remarkable. Derek had uninvited me from Christmas dinner 48 hours ago, and now he was requesting more money as if nothing had happened. As if treating me like a bank rather than a father was perfectly acceptable behavior. How much are you thinking? I asked, curious about whether he'd reveal the true scope of his foreclosure crisis. Maybe $15,000 to cover the mortgage and utilities through March. Linda has several house showings lined up for spring, and my performance bonus should come through in April. Derek's explanation was polished, practiced. He'd probably rehearsed this conversation with Linda, anticipating my questions and preparing reasonable responses. Derek, when was the last time you repaid any of the money you've borrowed from me? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Dad, you know it's not really borrowing between family. It's supporting each other through tough times. That's what family does. Family. The same word he used to exclude me from Christmas dinner. Family supported each other when convenient, but maintained boundaries when social situations required distance. I was family enough to fund Derek's lifestyle, but not family enough to share Christmas dinner with Linda's parents. I need to think about it, I said finally. The holidays have me reflecting on our relationship and how money factors into family dynamics. What do you mean?
Derek's voice carried new tension. He'd expected automatic approval, another transfer from Dad's account to Derek's problems. I'm getting older, Derek. I'm thinking about legacy, about what kind of relationship we really have versus what kind I thought we had. I walked through my house, noting family photographs that suddenly felt like evidence of a one-sided relationship. I'll get back to you next week. Dad, this can't wait until next week. The mortgage payment is due January 5th, and we're already behind. If we don't catch up soon, we could lose the house. There it was, the truth Derek had been hiding behind vague references to tight finances and seasonal business cycles. They weren't just behind on mortgage payments, they were facing imminent foreclosure. The $15,000 request was damage control, not a temporary solution. That sounds serious. How far behind are you exactly? I kept my voice concerned rather than accusatory, genuinely curious about how much Derek would reveal. A few months. The bank's been working with us, but they're running out of patience. Dad, Madison and Tyler can't lose their home. They don't understand adult financial problems. This would devastate them. Derek was using my grandchildren as leverage, appealing to emotions rather than addressing the fundamental problems in his approach to money management. Madison and Tyler would indeed be devastated by losing their home, but Derek's spending habits and financial irresponsibility had created the crisis. Have you considered downsizing, moving to something more affordable until your finances stabilize? It was a reasonable question that any financial advisor would ask. We can't uproot the kids from their schools and friends. Madison's in accelerated math and Tyler just started making real friendships in kindergarten. Moving would set them back academically and socially. Every response focused on maintaining current lifestyle rather than adapting to financial reality. Derek couldn't imagine scaling back his family's standard of living even temporarily. The house in Maple Ridge subdivision wasn't just shelter. It was identity, status, proof of success in Linda's real estate social circle. I understand your concern about the children's stability, I said carefully. Let me review my financial situation and get back to you by Friday. Friday? Dad, I need an answer sooner than that. The mortgage company won't wait for your convenience. Derek's frustration was showing now, the entitled expectation that my money should be available on his timeline. He'd excluded me from Christmas dinner, but expected immediate response to financial requests. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. Derek, I'm 68 years old. I don't make impulsive financial decisions anymore. Friday is my timeline. I ended the call before he could argue further. The house felt different now, charged with possibility rather than loneliness. Derek had confirmed everything I'd suspected about his financial crisis while revealing nothing about potential solutions beyond asking Dad for more money. He was trapped in a lifestyle he couldn't afford, supported by credit and family generosity rather than actual income. January 15th was 3 weeks away. Derek had until January 10th to resolve his mortgage default, requiring $63,000 he didn't have. I had registration confirmation for the foreclosure auction and liquid assets sufficient to outbid any likely competition. The irony was delicious. Derek thought he was manipulating his embarrassing father into another financial rescue. He had no idea that Walter Thompson was about to become his landlord through the most legitimate business transaction possible. I opened my laptop and began researching property management companies in Cedar Falls. If I successfully purchased Derek's house at auction, I would need professional assistance with tenant relations, rent collection, and maintenance issues. The emotional complications of being my son's landlord required careful preparation and clear boundaries. Frank Rodriguez called that evening with additional auction information. Walt, I looked into that foreclosure process you asked about.
The market's been competitive, but cash buyers still have significant advantages. What property were you considering? Something in Maple Ridge subdivision. Good schools, established neighborhood, potential for appreciation. I kept the details vague while gathering Frank's insights about local real estate trends. That's prime territory. Young families pay premium prices for those school districts. If you can buy at auction pricing and hold for a few years, you should see solid returns. Frank paused thoughtfully. You thinking about becoming a landlord in retirement? Maybe. Diversifying my portfolio while staying involved in local community development. The explanation sounded reasonable, even to me. What's your experience with rental property management? Frank shared war stories about tenant relations, maintenance headaches, and the importance of clear lease agreements. His advice was practical and occasionally cynical, based on 20 years of dealing with renters who considered property damage an acceptable cost of occupancy. The key is professional distance, Frank emphasized. Once you start making emotional decisions about tenants, you lose control of the business relationship. Rent gets paid on time or tenants get replaced. No exceptions for sob stories. Professional distance. That would be the challenge if I successfully bought Derek's house. Could I maintain business relationships with my son and daughter-in-law? Could I enforce lease terms with tenants who are also my grandchildren's parents? The questions would answer themselves soon enough. January 15th was approaching with mathematical certainty. Derek had 3 weeks to find $63,000 or face the consequences of years spent living beyond his means. I had 3 weeks to prepare for the most complicated real estate transaction of my life. The photo album sat in chronological order across my dining room table, like evidence at a trial. 18 years of Derek's adult life documented in birthday celebrations, graduations, holidays, and milestones. Each album told the same story from different angles. The steady transformation of a grateful young man into someone who viewed my support as his birthright rather than my choice. The earliest album showed Derek at 17, graduating high school with genuine enthusiasm for his future. He'd worked summers at Thompson & Associates, learning basic electrical skills and earning money for college expenses. Back then, Derek understood the connection between effort and reward, between work and wages. His graduation speech had thanked his teachers, his friends, and his father, who'd shown him that success came from showing up every day and doing the job right. College changed everything, though. The transformation happened gradually enough that I missed the warning signs. Derek's freshman year at Iowa State required standard expenses that every parent anticipated: tuition, room and board, textbooks, basic living costs. The numbers were manageable for a successful electrical contractor, though they meant postponing some business expansion plans and reducing my own discretionary spending. The first emergency call came during Derek's sophomore year. His roommate had moved out unexpectedly, leaving Derek responsible for the entire apartment rent until he could find a replacement. "Dad, I just need $800 to cover this month's rent. I've got 3 people interested in the room, should have someone by next week." The replacement roommate never materialized, and Derek spent the rest of the semester in an apartment he couldn't afford, funded by monthly checks from his father. Junior year brought the car crisis. Derek's reliable Toyota had suffered transmission failure, leaving him stranded without transportation for his internship at a marketing firm in Des Moines.
"Dad, I can't take the bus to a professional internship. The other interns drive nice cars. I need something that won't embarrass me in client meetings." The $12,000 Honda Accord was practical, professional, and completely beyond Derek's student budget. The internship itself became another financial drain when Derek discovered that his unpaid position required professional clothing, networking event attendance, and frequent client dinners. Each month brought new requests for clothing allowances, dry cleaning expenses, and meal money that somehow never covered the actual costs involved. "This internship could lead to a full-time job offer, Dad. I need to look the part and make the right connections." By senior year, Derek had stopped asking for specific amounts and started requesting monthly allowances to cover his elevated lifestyle. The marketing program required significant networking, professional development, and industry involvement that couldn't be funded through part-time jobs. "Dad, this is an investment in my career. The connections I'm making now will pay dividends for decades." Graduation brought temporary relief from college expenses, but Derek's entry into the working world created new financial demands. His first apartment required deposits, furniture, and professional wardrobe expansion. The marketing coordinator position paid reasonably well for an entry-level role, but Derek's lifestyle expectations had been shaped by 4 years of parental funding rather than student poverty. "Dad, I need to live somewhere that reflects my professional status. Clients sometimes visit my apartment for informal meetings. I can't bring potential accounts to some rundown college rental." The security deposit and first month's rent for Derek's downtown loft consumed most of my quarterly business profits, but his logic seemed sound at the time. Linda entered the picture during Derek's second year of professional work, and her influence accelerated his spending patterns dramatically. Linda's background in real estate had given her sophisticated tastes and expensive hobbies. Suddenly, Derek needed restaurant meals at establishments that charged more for appetizers than most people spent on entire dinners. Weekend trips to Chicago and Minneapolis became regular occurrences, funded through credit cards that Derek couldn't quite manage on this coordinator's salary. "Linda's showing me a different side of life, Dad. She knows about art, culture, fine dining. This is how successful people live." Derek's explanations grew more elaborate as his requests increased in size and frequency. Every expense became an investment in his future, every luxury a necessary component of professional advancement. The engagement ring alone cost more than my first truck. Derek had researched diamond specifications with the intensity he'd once applied to electrical circuit design, determined to purchase something worthy of Linda's sophisticated expectations. "Dad, this is a once-in-a-lifetime purchase. Linda deserves something special, and her friends all have substantial rings. I can't propose with something small." $8,000 for an engagement ring that Derek selected without consulting any budget or considering his actual financial capacity. The purchase was funded through a combination of credit and another loan from his father, rationalized as an investment in Derek's happiness and Linda's acceptance of his proposal.
Wedding planning revealed the true scope of Linda's lifestyle expectations and Derek's willingness to fund them through family resources. Every vendor consultation resulted in upgrades, additions, and enhancements that transformed a simple celebration into an elaborate production. The venue wasn't just a place to hold a ceremony, it was a statement about the couple's social status and financial sophistication. Dad, Linda's family is expecting a certain caliber of wedding. Her father owns the largest insurance agency in Cedar Falls, and her mother chairs the hospital fundraising committee. We can't embarrass them with something cheap.
The wedding budget escalated weekly as Derek and Linda discovered new necessities and upgraded every component to match Linda's vision. $28,000 for a single-day celebration that lasted 6 hours and impressed people I'd never met. The photography alone cost more than most families spent on vacation trips. The flowers required specialized ordering from commercial growers because local options weren't exotic enough for Linda's aesthetic requirements. Derek's transformation accelerated after marriage as Linda's influence became permanent rather than periodic. Joint decisions now involve two people with expensive tastes and limited understanding of budget constraints. The young man who'd once helped me install electrical panels now required consultation before making any financial commitment. Not because he'd become more careful with money, but because Linda insisted on approving all major purchases. Madison's birth triggered the housing emergency that would define the next phase of our financial relationship. Derek and Linda's apartment was adequate for a married couple, but insufficient for a family with Linda's parenting expectations. The baby required not just additional space, but the right kind of space, in the right neighborhood, with access to the right schools and social opportunities. Dad, we can't raise Madison in an apartment complex. She needs a yard, a safe neighborhood, good schools. This house in Maple Ridge is perfect for our family's future. The down payment request was the largest single financial commitment Derek had ever asked me to make, larger than college tuition or wedding expenses. $85,000 liquidated from my retirement accounts, subject to early withdrawal penalties and tax consequences that Derek never inquired about. The house purchase was structured with Derek and Linda as sole owners, despite my funding the entire down payment. For tax purposes, they'd explained, though I suspect Linda preferred keeping my name off official documents. Tyler's arrival 2 years later brought another round of financial demands disguised as family necessities. Childcare costs, medical expenses, larger vehicles, home modifications to accommodate 2 children. Each request was presented as essential for the grandchildren's welfare, leveraging my emotional investment in Madison and Tyler's happiness. The most recent crisis had revealed the scope of Derek's financial mismanagement and his fundamental misunderstanding of sustainable living. His mortgage troubles weren't the result of temporary setbacks or market fluctuations. They reflected years of spending beyond his means, funded through credit and family resources rather than income growth or career advancement. Derek had never learned to live within his means because my support had always provided alternative solutions to budget constraints. Every financial crisis had been resolved through external funding, rather than spending adjustments or lifestyle modifications. Marriage to Linda had reinforced these patterns by adding someone equally committed to maintaining appearances regardless of actual financial capacity. The photo albums told this story through facial expressions and background details I'd missed while living through each moment. Derek's smile grew more confident over the years, but his eyes showed less gratitude and more expectation. Early pictures captured genuine appreciation for family celebrations and gift exchanges. Recent photos showed someone going through social motions rather than feeling genuine emotion. Madison and Tyler appeared in the later albums as beautiful, well-dressed children living in an environment of comfortable abundance. Their Christmas mornings featured elaborate gift displays funded by credit cards and grandfather's generosity. Their birthday parties included professional entertainment and catered meals that most families would consider extravagant. But the children's expressions showed something troubling. Madison and Tyler expected luxury because they'd never experienced anything else. Their normal included private lessons, expensive toys, and constant adult attention focused on meeting their immediate desires. They were growing up with the same entitlement that had transformed their father from grateful son to demanding adult. The financial records spread across my coffee table confirmed what the photo albums suggested. $485,000 over 18 years, with the amounts increasing annually as Derek's lifestyle expectations grew more expensive. College expenses that should have ended at graduation had evolved into permanent family support disguised as temporary assistance. Each loan had been presented as the last one Derek would need, the final solution to his financial challenges. Each payment had enabled continued spending rather than encouraging budget discipline or career advancement. My generosity had created dependency rather than independence, entitlement rather than gratitude. The most devastating realization was that Derek genuinely believed his lifestyle was normal and sustainable. He'd never connected his standard of living to my sacrifices because the support had been provided so consistently that he'd stopped noticing it. My financial assistance had become invisible infrastructure, as taken for granted as electricity or running water. Linda had never known Derek without family financial support, so she'd married someone whose actual earning capacity was insufficient for their shared lifestyle expectations. Her real estate career provided supplemental income, but couldn't cover the mortgage payments on a house purchased with my down payment funding. The foreclosure crisis was inevitable given Derek's spending patterns and career trajectory. Marketing coordinator salaries, even with annual increases, couldn't support mortgage payments on a $400,000 house plus the credit card debt accumulated through years of lifestyle funding. Derek's financial foundation was built on family support rather than personal income, making collapse predictable once external funding became unreliable. My exclusion from Christmas dinner had been the final insult in a relationship that had become entirely transactional. Derek maintained contact when he needed money, but excluded me when my presence might complicate his social positioning. I was family enough to fund his lifestyle, but too embarrassing to include in celebrations with Linda's sophisticated relatives. The auction registration in my briefcase represented more than real estate investment. It was accountability education for a son who'd never faced consequences for financial irresponsibility. Derek would learn that actions have results, that lifestyle choices require sustainable funding, that family relationships involve mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. January 15th was 12 days away. Derek still believed his father would provide another financial rescue, probably larger than previous loans given the severity of his crisis. He had no idea that Walter Thompson was preparing to become his landlord through the most legitimate business transaction possible. The education would begin with eviction notices and lease agreements. Derek and Linda would discover what it felt like to live under someone else's rules, to justify expenses to someone with authority over their housing stability. They would learn respect through dependency, gratitude through vulnerability. Madison and Tyler would remain in their home, but under very different circumstances than they'd known throughout their young lives. Their grandfather would become their landlord, and their parents would become tenants subject to lease terms and payment schedules. The irony was perfect. Derek had excluded me from his family celebrations while expecting continued access to my financial resources. Soon he would discover that family relationships work both ways, and that respect flows upward as well as downward through generations. Derek's desperation became apparent on January 8th, 72 hours before his final opportunity to prevent foreclosure.
The phone call started at 7 in the morning and continued every 2 hours throughout the day, each message more frantic than the previous one.
His voicemail shifted from polite requests to barely controlled panic as the reality of his situation penetrated the denial he'd maintained for months. "Dad, I know you're screening my calls, but this is urgent. The bank gave us until January 10th to bring the mortgage current. We need $63,000, not the $15,000 I mentioned before. I should have been honest about how serious this was, but I thought we could handle it ourselves." The admission of deception was telling. Derek had deliberately minimized his crisis, hoping to secure another small loan that would delay rather than resolve his problems. Even facing homelessness, his instinct was manipulation rather than transparency. The pattern of financial dishonesty that had characterized our relationship for years was continuing, even under extreme pressure. Linda left her own voicemail that afternoon, her real estate agent composure cracking under stress. "Walt, this is Linda. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but Derek is too proud to explain how desperate our situation has become. We could lose everything we've worked for. Madison and Tyler don't understand why Daddy cries when he thinks they're not watching." Using my grandchildren as emotional leverage was Linda's specialty, but this time her appeal carried genuine terror rather than calculated manipulation. The woman who excluded me from Christmas dinner because I wasn't sophisticated enough for her parents was now begging for financial salvation from the same embarrassing father-in-law. Derek's evening call abandoned all pretense of family obligation and shifted to business negotiation. "Dad, I've been thinking about this more systematically. If you loan us the $63,000, I'll sign a promissory note with interest. We can make it official, with payment schedules and everything. You'll get your money back with a reasonable return." The offer was laughable. Derek couldn't make his current mortgage payments and was proposing to add another $63,000 debt obligation. His mathematical reasoning had been corrupted by desperation, leading him to believe that additional debt would solve problems caused by existing debt. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to Derek's progression from confident requests to desperate pleas. The man who dismissed me from family celebrations was discovering what financial independence actually meant when you'd never developed the skills to achieve it. Each unanswered call increased his panic and reduced his negotiating position. January 9th brought a different approach. Derek appeared at my front door at 8 in the morning, unshaven and hollow-eyed from sleepless nights. Madison and Tyler sat in his Honda, still in their pajamas, confused about why they weren't at school and why Daddy looked so worried. "Dad, we need to talk face-to-face. This phone tag isn't working." Derek's voice carried exhaustion and something approaching humility, though I suspected the children's presence was calculated to maximize emotional impact. I invited him inside, but suggested the children might be more comfortable waiting in the warm car with books or games. Derek's shoulders sagged with relief when I didn't immediately refuse to see him, interpreting basic courtesy as potential agreement to his financial requests. "Dad, I know I've made mistakes. Linda and I both realize we should have included you in Christmas dinner. That was wrong, and we're sorry." The apology was carefully rehearsed, probably coached by Linda, who understood that contrition might be necessary for securing financial assistance. "What specific mistakes are you referring to, Derek?" I settled into my recliner, studying my son's face for signs of genuine understanding versus surface-level damage control. "We've been taking your support for granted. We got caught up in maintaining appearances and forgot about family priorities." Derek's confessions sounded like therapy speak, psychological terminology applied to practical problems without real comprehension.
"What appearance were you maintaining when you uninvited me from Christmas dinner?" The question was direct, designed to test whether Derek would acknowledge the full scope of his behavior. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his prepared apology inadequate for specific confrontation. "Linda was worried about mixing different social groups. Her parents are very traditional, and she thought having too many people might be overwhelming." Even desperate for money, Derek couldn't admit that he'd been embarrassed by his working-class father. The explanation blamed Linda's parents for decisions that Derek and Linda had made together, probably after discussing how my presence might affect their social positioning. "Derek, do you remember when you were 12 and wanted to quit Little League because some kids made fun of your secondhand cleats? I watched his face for recognition of the parallel situation. Vaguely? What does that have to do with anything? I told you that people who judge others based on their equipment aren't worth impressing. I said real friends accept you regardless of what you wear or drive or can afford. The memory was apparently too distant for Derek to connect to current circumstances. Dad, this isn't about childhood baseball. This is about losing our house. Madison and Tyler could be homeless by next week. Derek's deflection revealed his fundamental inability to recognize patterns in his behavior. Where would you go if the foreclosure proceeds? I was genuinely curious about Derek's backup plans, assuming he'd developed any contingencies for this predictable outcome. We don't have anywhere to go. Linda's parents don't have space for 4 people, and none of our friends can accommodate a family long term. We'd probably have to find some extended stay motel until we could rent an apartment. Derek had apparently spent months fighting foreclosure without developing realistic alternatives. His planning focused entirely on preventing the crisis rather than managing its consequences, another example of the magical thinking that had characterized his financial decision-making for years. What about downsizing to something you can actually afford? The suggestion was obvious, but apparently hadn't occurred to Derek and Linda as a viable option. Dad, we can't disrupt the kids' school situation. Madison is in gifted programs, and Tyler just made friends in kindergarten. Moving would set them back academically and socially. Derek's response revealed the core problem underlying his financial crisis. Every decision prioritized maintaining current lifestyle over adapting to financial reality. Derek and Linda couldn't imagine scaling back their standard of living, even temporarily, because they'd never learned to distinguish between wants and needs. The house in Maple Ridge wasn't just shelter, it was identity confirmation that they belonged in Linda's social circle. Derek, what would happen if I said no? If I told you I wasn't going to provide any more financial assistance? The question was hypothetical, but Derek's response would reveal his actual understanding of his situation. Dad, you can't say no. We're family. Madison and Tyler are your grandchildren. You wouldn't let them suffer because of adult financial problems. Derek's appeal combined emotional manipulation with moral obligation, suggesting that refusing to enable his irresponsibility was equivalent to harming innocent children. The children's suffering is caused by their parents' poor financial decisions, not by their grandfather's refusal to subsidize those decisions indefinitely. I kept my voice calm but direct, forcing Derek to confront the actual source of his family's crisis. Derek's face flushed with anger, his desperation overwhelmed by defensive indignation. That's easy for you to say. You don't have kids depending on you for everything. You don't understand the pressure of providing for a family in today's economy. The accusation was remarkable, coming from someone who'd been providing for his family through his father's resources rather than his own income.
Derek had convinced himself that his lifestyle was normal and achievable, that his financial problems were environmental rather than behavioral. Derek, I provided for you for 18 years after your mother died. I understand exactly what it means to support a family. The reminder of my actual parenting experience versus Derek's theoretical understanding was important for maintaining perspective. That was different. You were the parent, I was the child. Now I'm the parent, and Madison and Tyler need stability. Derek's logic was circular, suggesting that being a parent entitled him to unlimited family financial support regardless of his behavior or appreciation. I walked to my desk and retrieved the manila folder containing 18 years of financial documentation. Derek watched nervously as I spread bank statements and receipts across the coffee table between us. This is $485,000 in support I've provided since you graduated college. Every check, every transfer, every loan that was never repaid. The visual evidence was overwhelming, even for Derek, who'd lived through each transaction. Derek stared at the paperwork with obvious shock. He'd apparently never calculated the cumulative total of my financial assistance, treating each request as an isolated transaction rather than part of a larger pattern. Dad, I had no idea it was that much. Some of those were loans, not gifts. I've always intended to pay you back when my career stabilized. Derek's protest was weak, undermined by 18 years of unpaid obligations and escalating requests. Which specific loans have you repaid, Derek?
Show me one example of money you've returned as promised. The challenge was direct, designed to force acknowledgement of his actual behavior versus his stated intentions. Derek studied the documents, searching for evidence of repayment that didn't exist. His face showed growing comprehension that every financial transaction had flowed in one direction, from my accounts to his problems, without reciprocal responsibility or gratitude. I see your point, but family relationships aren't business transactions. Parents help children build successful lives. That's how family wealth grows over generations. Derek's explanation revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of family financial dynamics. Family wealth grows when children contribute to family success rather than consuming family resources indefinitely. You've been a financial drain for 18 years, not a contributor to family prosperity. The assessment was harsh but accurate, supported by comprehensive documentation. Derek's anger returned, this time directed at my refusal to accept his rationalization of irresponsible behavior. So now you're calling me a drain? Your own son is a drain because I needed help getting established in life? Derek, you're 35 years old. Madison is 8 years old. Tyler is 5. At what point do you consider yourself established enough to stop requiring financial rescue from your father? The question highlighted Derek's stunted development, his inability to transition from dependent child to self-sufficient adult. This is temporary. Linda's real estate business is picking up, and I'm being considered for a promotion. We just need to get through this crisis, then we can start paying you back. Derek's promises were identical to commitments he'd made during previous financial emergencies, never fulfilled because new crises always emerged before old debts were addressed. I gathered the financial documents and returned them to the folder, Derek watching anxiously as evidence of my support disappeared from view. His body language showed recognition that our conversation was ending without the financial commitment he'd expected. Derek, I'll give you my decision tomorrow morning. I need time to review my own financial situation and consider what's best for everyone involved. The delay was calculated, designed to maximize Derek's anxiety while I prepared for the auction scheduled in 6 days. Derek left my house with obvious frustration, his confident expectation of automatic family support shaken by confrontation with documented evidence of his financial dependency.
Through my window, I watched him return to the car, where Madison and Tyler waited with innocent trust that Daddy would solve whatever problem was keeping them from their normal routine. The children had no idea their grandfather owned registration documents for the foreclosure auction that would determine their family's future. They didn't understand that Daddy's problem wasn't temporary bad luck, but the predictable consequence of years spent living beyond his means through family financial support. January 10th was tomorrow. Derek's final opportunity to prevent foreclosure would pass without resolution, guaranteeing that his house would be sold at public auction. The only question remaining was whether Walter Thompson would be the successful bidder, completing the most complicated real estate transaction of his retirement. Derek's education was about to begin, whether he was ready or not. The Cedar Falls County Courthouse steps felt solid beneath my boots as I climbed toward the auction that would reshape my family's future. January 15th arrived with bitter Iowa wind and crystal-clear skies, the kind of morning that made important decisions feel inevitable rather than chosen. Inside the courthouse, potential bidders clustered around registration tables while county clerks verified financial documentation and explained auction procedures. I recognized several faces from Cedar Falls' business community, investors who specialized in distressed properties and rental income opportunities. None of them knew they were competing against the grandfather of the family they might be evicting. Derek's house appeared as lot number 17 in the auction catalog, scheduled for approximately 11:30, depending on bidding pace for earlier properties. The estimated market value remained $420,000, but the opening bid was set at $340,000, reflecting the bank's desire for quick resolution rather than maximum recovery. David Park from First National Bank approached me at 10:45, his professional smile masking curiosity about my presence among serious real estate investors. "Mr. Thompson, I'm surprised to see you here today. Have you identified a specific property of interest?" "The Colonial on Maple Ridge Drive. 4 bedrooms, good bones, excellent school district." I kept my response businesslike, avoiding any hint of personal connection to the property. "That's a strong choice. The neighborhood has maintained property values despite economic fluctuations, and rental demand is consistent for family housing in that area." David consulted his notes about upcoming lots. "Fair warning, though, that particular property might attract competitive bidding given the location and condition." Competitive bidding. David had no idea that I was prepared to outbid any reasonable offer, that my interest in Lot 17 transcended normal investment calculations. This wasn't just real estate acquisition. It was family education disguised as legitimate business transaction. The auctioneer called Lot 17 at 11:28, his rapid-fire delivery cutting through courthouse acoustics as he described the property specifications. 4-bedroom colonial, approximately 2,400 square feet, attached garage, professionally landscaped, Maple Ridge subdivision. Opening bid, $340,000. 3 hands rose immediately, including mine. The bidding pace accelerated quickly as investors evaluated potential profit margins against acquisition costs. $400,000, $420,000, $435,000. Each increment represented serious money to most participants, but I had advantages they lacked. I knew the property intimately, having funded its original purchase through Derek's down payment loan. I understood the neighborhood dynamics, the school district reputation, the maintenance history.
Most importantly, I had emotional investment that transcended normal return on investment calculations. $450,000 eliminated 2 bidders who reached their predetermined limits. $460,000 reduced competition to myself and 1 remaining investor, a woman in an expensive coat who consulted her phone between bids, probably confirming financial limits with business partners. $470,000, I called clearly, meeting the auctioneer's eyes with confidence that suggested higher bids were readily available if necessary. The woman in the expensive coat shook her head, withdrawing from competition that exceeded her investment parameters. The auctioneer called for additional bids twice before declaring Lot 17 sold to Walter Thompson for $470,000. Paperwork completion required 30 minutes of signatures, financial verification, and title transfer documentation. I provided a certified check for $47,000 as required deposit, with remaining balance due within 30 days. The county clerk explained eviction procedures for properties where former owners remained in residence, though I indicated my preference for negotiated tenant relationships rather than forced removal. Derek's house now belonged to me, purchased through legitimate foreclosure auction for slightly above market value. The irony was perfect. My son had excluded me from Christmas dinner while living in a house that I'd funded and would now own completely. The drive to Maple Ridge subdivision felt different now, traveling toward property I owned rather than visiting family who tolerated my presence. Derek's Honda sat in the driveway of my rental property, along with Linda's white SUV and Madison's bicycle near the garage. Normal suburban family life, about to be complicated by new landlord-tenant dynamics. I parked on the street and walked to the front door, carrying copies of auction documentation and a preliminary lease agreement Patricia Sullivan had drafted for my review. The legal relationship between Derek and myself was about to become much more formal than either of us had experienced. Derek answered the doorbell with obvious anxiety, his face showing relief and confusion when he saw me standing on his porch. "Dad, thank God you're here. Did you bring the check? The bank said we had until 5 o'clock today, but I wasn't sure if that was a hard deadline." "Derek, we need to talk. May I come in?" I stepped past him into the living room where Linda sat surrounded by real estate documents, her laptop open to mortgage company websites. "Walt, did you bring the money?" Linda's directness was refreshing after years of indirect manipulation disguised as family obligation. We've been calling mortgage companies all morning, but they won't extend the deadline without full payment. I settled into the armchair where I'd read Christmas stories to Madison and Tyler, the same chair Derek had excluded me from using during holiday celebrations. The children were at school, unaware that their housing situation had changed dramatically during their absence. Derek, Linda, I need to explain something important. The foreclosure auction concluded 2 hours ago. Your house has been sold to a new owner. I watched their faces process this information, confusion replacing hope as they understood the implications. Sold? But Dad, you were supposed to help us prevent that from happening. Derek's voice carried betrayal and disbelief, as if my failure to provide financial rescue was a breach of contract rather than a choice. The house sold for $470,000, approximately $50,000 above the outstanding mortgage balance. After legal fees and auction costs, you should receive some proceeds from the sale. I kept my explanation factual, postponing revelation of my identity as the purchaser. Linda's real estate experience helped her understand the situation more quickly than Derek. Walt, who bought our house? Do we have any negotiating room for leaseback arrangements or extended possession while we find alternative housing?
The new owner is interested in lease arrangements with current residents, assuming mutually acceptable terms can be negotiated. I pulled out Patricia's draft lease agreement and placed it on the coffee table between us. Derek reached for the paperwork with desperate eagerness, scanning rental terms and payment schedules without reading carefully. His focus was entirely on immediate housing security, rather than understanding the broader implications of tenant status. "These terms seem reasonable," Linda said, studying the lease with professional competence. "Below market rent for this neighborhood, standard damage deposit, annual lease with renewal options. Who is this new owner?" I let the question hang in the air for several seconds, watching Derek and Linda examine documentation that would reshape our family relationships permanently. Their relief at avoiding homelessness was about to be complicated by recognition of their new landlord's identity. "The new owner is Walter Thompson. You'll be renting from me." The words felt both satisfying and sad, the culmination of 18 years of financial irresponsibility finally reaching its logical conclusion. Derek's face went through several expressions rapidly: confusion, recognition, anger, humiliation, and finally something approaching understanding. "You bought our house? You let it go to foreclosure and then bought it yourself?" "I participated in a public auction and submitted the winning bid. Everything was conducted through legitimate legal channels with proper documentation." My explanation was accurate but incomplete, avoiding discussion of emotional motivations behind business decisions. Linda's response was more practical than Derek's. "What are the lease terms? When do you need our decision? How long do we have to get our finances organized?" "Standard residential lease, rent due monthly, 1-year initial term. You can review the complete agreement and provide your decision within 48 hours. I stood to leave, giving them privacy to process their new situation. Derek followed me to the front door, his emotional state fluctuating between anger and desperation. "Dad, this feels like punishment for Christmas dinner. Are you trying to teach us some lesson about family loyalty?" "Derek, this is about accountability for financial decisions. You've been living beyond your means for 18 years, funded through family resources rather than personal income. Now you'll learn to manage housing costs within an actual budget." "What about Madison and Tyler? They don't understand adult financial problems. This will confuse and scare them." Derek's appeal to his children's welfare was predictable, though it carried more genuine concern than his previous manipulative attempts. "Madison and Tyler will continue living in the same house, attending the same schools, playing in the same neighborhood. Their stability is assured as long as rent gets paid on time." I walked toward my truck, leaving Derek to contemplate his family's new reality. The drive home felt lighter despite the emotional complexity of owning Derek's house.
Family relationships would never return to their previous dynamics, but perhaps they could evolve into something based on mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. Derek and Linda had 48 hours to decide whether they wanted to become my tenants or find alternative housing. Either choice would teach them lessons about financial responsibility that my previous generosity had prevented them from learning. Madison and Tyler would discover that Grandpa Walt wasn't just a source of Christmas presents and birthday money. He was also their landlord, someone with authority over their housing security and their parents' accountability. The education was finally beginning, 18 years after it should have started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.